Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into an absolutely fascinating detective story, and it is hidden right in plain sight within an ancient text. We're going to be unpacking a really intriguing kids' Bible study video script, along with its research report. It's this wild journey that connects an ancient genealogy, Hebrew linguistics, and literally the shape of our continents. We're looking at a true geological cryptogram.
So, to kick things off, have you ever just looked at a world map and noticed how the coastlines of places like South America and Africa look exactly like puzzle pieces? Like they're just meant to click right together? It's one of those things kids notice almost immediately, even though us grown-ups kind of brush it off. Well, our sources point out that this simple childlike observation is actually the perfect starting point for decoding a much, much older mystery.
Today's explainer investigates a really profound question raised by a recent kids' study guide called The Boy Named Split. It asks this crazy question: what if a boy in the Bible, a guy with a very strange name, actually holds the key to this whole puzzle piece Earth concept? The study encourages us to read the text almost like code breakers, looking super closely at the details that most people just completely skim past.
For instance, way up in the front of the Bible, buried in one of those long genealogy lists that, let's be honest, we all usually skip, there's Genesis chapter 10, verse 25. And it mentions a boy named Peleg. Now, his name literally translates to division or split, and the text explicitly says he got this name because in his time, the earth was divided. I mean, that's like naming your kid Earthquake. It strongly suggests a massive world-altering event happened right when he was born.
And when you actually sit down and do the math based on the biblical text, counting the generations from the end of the Great Flood, through Arphaxad, Shelah, and Eber, you find out that Peleg was born exactly 101 years after the flood ended. So the timing really suggests his parents named him to memorialize some massive, absolutely unprecedented event that literally reshaped their world. Well, this leads us to our first real childlike detective question, and it's one we got to ask out loud. What exactly got divided during Peleg's life, right? Was it just, groups of people migrating away from each other, or was it the physical Earth itself? To answer that, the research report tells us we have to look past the English translation and dig right into the original languages. So we have to look at the Hebrew root word for Peleg, which is Peleg. According to the linguistic research in our sources, Peleg isn't just your everyday generic word for splitting something apart. It is deeply and fundamentally rooted as a water word. Its native sense is very specifically tied to division by water.
And what's super fascinating here is that everywhere else this specific noun appears in the Bible, like in the Psalms or the book of Job, for instance, a Peleg specifically means a water channel. Think of a small river or maybe an irrigation trench cut through the dirt by a farmer to get water to his trees. The imagery is entirely about land being physically carved and separated by water. And this brilliantly illustrates our mystery, because just a few verses later in Genesis 10:32, the text says, "From these the nations spread out over the earth after the flood." But for that human dispersion, the author uses completely different Hebrew words, parad or pus. The research points out that the author deliberately chose the water-carving word Peleg for Peleg's big event. That strongly hints at a physical, water-driven division of the earth itself, totally separate from the political scattering at Babel. So, to figure out how the earth could actually be divided by water, the kids' study video points us right back to the very beginning, Genesis 1:9. It describes how God commands to let the water under the sky be gathered to one place and let dry ground appear. Now, logically, if all the water on the globe is gathered into one single bounded reservoir, that means there's only one single giant landmass. Could this actually be the ancient description of Pangea? And as the research report details, this isn't just some modern creative interpretation. It's actually amazing to see that ancient Jewish traditions and Second Temple texts fully back up this flat grammatical reading. Texts like the Book of Jubilees, First Enoch, and various rabbinic midrashim, they all describe an ancient cosmology featuring a single connected ocean encircling one giant supercontinent. Okay, let's lay out our cryptogram evidence on the board here. Clue 1, Genesis 1:9 gives us an original single landmass. Clue 2, our modern map looks exactly like broken puzzle pieces. Clue 3, Peleg's name specifically means a water channel division. And clue 4, this happened exactly 101 years after the massive aquatic upheaval of the global flood. When we string all these distinct clues together, they point to an incredibly compelling visual. Pangea, a Greek term that literally means all the land. The puzzle pieces of our Earth splitting apart and drifting across the ocean. The really wild implication here is that this massive geological event was potentially recorded by a shepherd's family thousands of years before any scientist ever owned a world map.
And while this might sound like a strictly modern way to read the ancient text, the research shows it's really not. What's absolutely fascinating is that the renowned British Methodist commentator Adam Clarke explicitly endorsed this literal continental division reading way back in 1832. He argued that the earthy parts were originally united into one great continent right up until the days of Peleg. To put that into perspective, Adam Clarke was writing about a single shifting supercontinent decades before the French geographer Antonio Snider Pellegrini proposed his theory in 1858, and that's over 80 years before Alfred Wegener formalized the modern scientific theory of plate tectonics in 1912. Our sources really emphasize that this water geographic reading has highly credible and very ancient roots.
But, this brings us to the philosophical synthesis of our whole detective story. It's not just about the how, it is really about the why. If this cryptogram is real, why did God physically divide the earth and spread out the nations and their families after the flood? Like, what is the larger narrative purpose behind all these drifting puzzle pieces?
Well, the Kids Study Guide finds the answer in the New Testament, pointing directly to Acts chapter 17. The text there states that God determined the time set for all nations and the exact places where they should live. The study guide suggests this incredible geographic and political division wasn't some random accident. It was a purposeful gift, designed specifically so that every isolated family in every newly separated land would reach out to seek and find him. It really just goes to show us that the parts of ancient texts we usually gloss over can be incredibly rich with meaning. So, the question I want to leave you with is this. If a simple, seemingly boring list of ancient names actually holds the linguistic and historical cryptogram of our shifting continents, what other massive mysteries are sitting right there in plain sight, just waiting for you to decode them?